Assalamu alaikum everyone. So this is my big data analytics project where I've used Spark MLlib and Apache Mahout for performing machine learning training and testing. So first of all, I will begin with uh, Spark MLlib where I will pull the container using the following command. So this is the command which I will use to pull the Spark notebook. As you can see that this command has provided me with a link which I can copy and paste in my browser. So I have pasted this link over here. And this has given me a new notebook. I can choose Python. So using this notebook, I have used Spark, different machine learning libraries for performing the pre-processing of the data and training it and then testing it. So in the testing, I have used R square for my as the data was based on regression. So first of all, I began with counting the columns and then I moved to seeing that how many columns and what columns are there in my data set. So I also checked their types. After this, I converted the necessary types into integers and I dropped some columns as well. Besides this, I also checked if there were any columns that were empty or null. So I replaced all those columns with 0. After this, I checked again my data. So some of the columns that I converted to integers are now converted to integers. So I selected some features which are used as independent variables to determine the dependent variable. In this data set, we have a dependent variable, which is the arrival delay. So we are checking if the flight will be delayed or not. So first of all, I had to transform my data into two columns. For the features, I made one column and the other column was based on arrival delays. Secondly, we split the data into two sets for training and testing. 70% of data was kept for training and 30% of data was kept for testing. So I first of all began with linear regression. You can see that I've used linear regression and then predicted and then tested the performance of my model on the test data. In this, I have found that R square on test data is 0.925 approximately. After this, I ran a decision tree regressor for which the performance was not very good and the time taken was uh, even more. So it gave me a R square of 0.72. After this, I ran GBT regressor, which is gradient boosting tree regressor. In this, I got the R square of about 0.82, which I have also mentioned in the report. So now moving on to the Apache layout, we can use this command to pull the container and execute it. You can see that now we have entered the Mahout container where we can use Scala commands for uh, carrying out our processing and machine learning training using Scala language. So I had created a new Mahout image where I have copied my data for machine learning. So I can use the image ID for that image to run it and execute my data. So we will use the command of, you can see that now we have entered our Mahout container where we have our data as well. So now I can load the data into a data frame using the command. As we can see that our data has now been loaded in the data frame of Apache Spark. We can now use this data frame to perform our machine learning training and testing. So after loading the data into the Apache Mahout, we have saved it in a data frame. After that, we have converted the data into the integer types using the following all these commands. Step by step I have converted different columns, so these columns are then used for training the machine learning model. So in this I have used some other commands to drop the columns that are not in integers and that are not required. So these commands are used for dropping all the columns that are not in integers and are in strings, so they are not used for training. After this, I've used this method for saving the data into X and Y variables. X variables include those features that are independent, and Y include the feature that is a dependent variable, which is the expected delay in the arrival. So after this, data is saved in the data frames, and then we have perform further pre-processing and then perform regression solution. Then this data is fed into a linear regression model using these commands. and then the results can be obtained using these procedures.